From the outside looking in, it can sometimes appear that peak performers have an elusive talent or skill that sets them apart from the rest of us. However, what usually sets peak performers apart isn't what they can do, it's what they will do. You are listening to the Trading Edges Podcast, the podcast dedicated to seeking and sharing the best ideas and principles from peak performers across all domains of performance and achievement to help you discover your full trading potential.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Trading Edges. This week, we take a pause from our regularly scheduled program to do what I'm calling a mini episode or an in-between episode. This episode will be fairly short and just feature me, sharing some ideas that I've been kicking around as of late. Before we start today, I just want to thank all the listeners who've supported the show and sent in all the positive feedback. So if you're enjoying the show, I would really appreciate if you could just leave us a positive review on iTunes so that others can find the show. Now let's move on to the meat of the show. And today we're going to be talking about some big ideas. And I think one of the most important things that one can do to develop themselves as a trader is to read outside the domain of trading. It's so easy to develop tunnel vision when it comes to trading. So I love reading outside the field of trading. And funny enough, inevitably what I find is that I find parallels that relate back to trading. As you may or may not know, I'm a pretty avid reader. I read about 100 books a year. And if you haven't checked it out already, you can go to thetradingedge.org/books and you can find a list of my top 50 recommended books for traders. It really spans all kinds of subject matters and not specifically trading titles. Anyways, this week I want to talk to you about a book I recently read called Essentialism by an author named Greg McKeown. The book does a really good job at encapsulating a lot of big ideas in such a small book. And I want to share 3 of those big ideas in today's show. And the 3 big ideas are as follows. Number 1, the power of structure and boundaries. Number 2, an acronym called WIN, which stands for What's Important Now. And number 3, the story of Herbie and finding the Herbies in your life. So let's talk about the book now. So here's the big picture for the book. We've all heard the following phrases. The more, the merrier, right? The bigger, the better. In theory, these phrases make sense, but why does it have to be that way? What if we started pursuing less but better? And as Greg McKeown puts it, it's not about getting more things done, it's about getting the right things done. And if we apply this idea to trading, we've all understand this at an intellectual level, but it's not about trading more. It's about trading less but better. So in the book, McKeown goes through various ways to determine and follow what's essential. And that's the name of his book, right? Essentialism. And one of his ideas is to create disciplined routines, or kind of the big idea, this first big idea is to create boundaries as a source of liberation. As McKeown puts it, in quotes, non-essentialists tend to think of boundaries as constraints or limits, things that get in their way of life. To a non-essentialist, setting boundaries is an evidence of weakness. If they are strong enough, they think they don't need boundaries, that they can cope with it all, that they can do it all. But without limits, they eventually become spread so thin that getting anything done becomes virtually impossible. Essentialists, on the other hand, see boundaries as empowering. They recognize that boundaries protect them and are a source of liberation. Close quotes. So this idea really sparked some thoughts for me. And I guess the best way to demonstrate this is by telling a story that was in the book of a school that was located next to a busy road. So at the school, at first, the children played only on a small patch of the playground close to the building where the grown-ups keep their eyes on them. But then someone constructed a fence around the playground, and now the children were able to play anywhere and everywhere on the playground. Their freedom, in effect, more than doubled. So rather than encumber them, the fences offered the children more freedom. So let's extend this analogy now to trading, or this metaphor. One of the most compelling, yet at the same time difficult challenges for traders is that the market is completely unstructured, right? So unlike other games, like games of chance you find at a casino, the market is perpetual. And I've talked to other guests in the past. One of the guests was Brendan Moynihan, the author of a great book that we talked about on that episode called Lessons I Learned Losing $1 Million. And the idea is that the market being perpetual is that the game never ends. So really, it's incumbent on traders to create the rules or structure on when the game quote unquote starts and ends. So let me give you an example of some boundaries, and it's around this idea of extreme criteria or filtering. And McKeown offers a simple, systematic process that you can use to apply this kind of selective criteria to opportunities that come your way. And I've adapted this for trading. In fact, it's not far from the methods that I actually currently use for my trading. It's kind of a 3-step process. Let's go through it. Number 1, and this relates to trading. Number 1, first, explicitly define your setup. That is, write it down exactly. So most of us, if you've had a trade plan or if you've thought about how you're gonna enter trades, then you probably have already done this step. Step 2, write down a list of the 3 minimum criteria the setup would need to pass in order to be considered. Then, step 3, write down a list of 3 ideal or extreme criteria the setup would need to pass in order to be considered. And by definition, if the setup doesn't pass the first set of criteria, you don't take the trade. But also, if it doesn't pass 2 of your 3 extreme criteria, then you also pass on that setup. So by definition, right, applying this highly selective criteria is a trade-off. Sometimes you'll have to turn down some seemingly very good trades and have faith that the perfect trades will come along soon. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But the point is that the very act of selective criteria forces you to choose which perfect option to wait for, rather than trying to get involved in every single wiggle, which I see a lot of traders who overtrade tend to do. So, play with that idea. Big idea number 2 is around the acronym WIN, W-I-N. What's important now? And this is a beautiful question to ask ourselves throughout the trading day before taking any trading decisions. Instead of getting caught up rehashing perhaps how that last trade went wrong, or spending mental energy about whether or not you're up or down for the day, which, neither of which is constructive or helpful, asking this question encourages you to focus only on the moment you are in right now. Second, the question, what's important now, helps you stay focused on how you're trading. In the book, McKeown recounts the story of a storied rugby coach named Larry Gelwicks. And Gelwicks believes a huge part of winning is determined by whether the players are focused on their own game or on their opponent's game. If the players start thinking about the other team, they lose focus. Consciously or not, they start wanting to play the way the other team is playing. They get distracted and divided. By focusing on their game in the here and now, they can all unite around a single strategy. This level of unity makes execution of the game plan relatively frictionless. And as from the book, he tells his players, quote unquote, or quote, there is a difference between losing and being beaten. Being beaten means they are better than you. They are faster, stronger, or more talented. Unquote. But to Gelwicks, losing means something else. It just means you lost focus. It means you didn't concentrate on what was essential. And I think this is a very powerful distinction to keep in mind while trading. In trading, whether or not you closed your day profitably is irrelevant, right? Rather, it's whether or not you followed your trading process. And if you didn't, it's probably because you lost focus. You lost focus on what was essential. So play with this idea, right? So we're talking about being outcome focused versus process focused versus outcome focused, and using that question, what's important now, to remain in the moment and focused on process. Let's move on now to big idea number 3, the last one. And it goes back to this story of Herbie, and I'll get to what that means in a few moments here. So imagine you're a scoutmaster, and you're taking a troop of kids on a 10-mile hike and need to arrive at camp before sunset. You start out, and of course some of the kids are moving faster than others. And soon there's a huge gap between the slow and faster scouts. One boy, Herbie, is really behind everyone. So you stop the faster scouts and have them wait for Herbie to catch up. Now they're all together, but usually within a few minutes, the problem's recreated. So you decide to put Herbie in the lead, and all the others follow behind him, right? Problem fixed. No problem, right? Unfortunately, no. Now they will never reach camp before sunset. So how do you proceed? And the answer is, knowing Herbie is the key. Basically, you take all the stuff out of Herbie's his backpack, and distribute the load amongst the troop. Herbie can now move faster, and fast enough to get to camp by sunset, but not faster than the others, and thus the group gets to camp on time. So it's time to ask yourself a question. In trading or in life, who or what are your Herbies? To be a true essentialist, you have to find a way to eliminate the things that slow you down. It's my belief that the highest achievers across all endeavors are those who excel at playing their game. This means focusing on your strengths and removing the friction of what slows you down and not trying to do everything. Again, focus on less but better pursuits. So to summarize, we've covered 3 big ideas on this show. Number 1, the importance of creating structure or boundaries and applying selective criteria or extreme criteria. Number 2, the acronym of WIN, what's important now. And finally, number 3, the story of Herbie and finding the Herbies in your life. As always, I'm curious to hear what you thought about these ideas. Which one of these resonated most with you? Head on over to thetradingedge.org/episode 14 and leave us a comment. As always, happy trading. Take care.
You've been listening to the Trading Edges podcast. We've taken this interview and summarized all the big ideas so that you can take action. Just head over to thetradingedge.org/podcast to find the show notes, transcript, resources, and to continue the conversation.